Story by Broja Dog. The Missing Pages of Time. I arrived at work at 8 a.m. like I normally did. Fully normal, boring day ahead, or so I thought. I sat down at my desk, turned on my computer, and started going through my emails. I remember reading through them, clicking on a few messages, thinking about what I needed to get done that day. It felt like I had just started. Maybe a few minutes had passed, maybe half an hour. Then one of my coworkers came over and asked if I wanted to go grab lunch. I remember thinking she was joking because I'm always eating, but not fat. I saw her face, no humor detected. I looked at the clock and it was noon. For a second, I honestly thought there had to be some mistake. I arrived at 8. I knew that for a fact, and yet 4 hours had passed, and I had almost no memory of them. I looked at a couple emails, and then it's lunchtime. What? The weirdest part was that I wasn't working on anything complicated. I was just checking emails. If I had looked up and realized maybe an hour had passed while I was working on something important, I probably wouldn't have thought much about it. That happens because it's such monotonous work. But here, nope. There was no moment where I thought that, wow, time is going by fast. It was just the beginning of the morning, and then suddenly it was grub time. I didn't feel like I had fallen asleep. I didn't feel like I had woken up from a dream. I felt completely normal, which almost made it more disturbing. My memory just seemed to jump from sitting down at my desk to my coworker asking me about lunch. Also, no work had been done on my end, which implies that I either literally spaced out for hours and no one noticed, or I vanished, which is also impossible that no one would notice. So, like I've mentioned before, I think that time can be localized because everything depends on the relativity of their own reference frame. There's no absolute speed. There's only speed against what? There's no absolute time. There's only your time relative to someone else's time. It's very trippy and it's never going to be intuitive to understand. But the point is, you can have localized effects where time is warped for one person or another in a certain sense. Now, scientifically, it shouldn't happen based on how we know what can affect time in this way. That's speed or gravity, which kind of coalesce into one, but anyways. You get this instance where, especially in this case, it doesn't really add up because of how it would appear to others. Like if you're just out in the open and time is warped for you for maybe a few seconds, a minute, you can imagine other people might look at you like, oh, you're behaving weird, you're moving slowly or fast, whatever it might be. But in this case, for hours, like you say, if you had your own office, sure, maybe no one came to see you in that period of time. But no, in this case, it's hours and hours. There's no possible way that no one saw you, just like sitting there frozen, doing absolutely nothing? No, I don't see how that's possible. Or like you say, if you vanished, that's also impossible. Someone would have noticed. So the fact that no one noticed is the mystery. The time itself being distorted, that happens apparently all the time. Sorry for the pun. Yeah. But hey, at least you got to go eat food after and apparently nothing else happened, so it could be worse. Welcome, I'm Paul. This little fella is Dave. Today, I have 6 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. One of them is really long and interesting. Let's get to it. Story by Spiritual Ace, The Black Eyes of Winter. Around the fall or winter of 2023, I had what I believe was a demonic encounter. I'm not sure if it was a jinn, a demon, legion, or Lucifer himself, but this is my story. I was going through a tough time in my life from February of 2023 until March of 2024. I'm not really here to spill my excuses or explain the reasons, and I was at complete rock bottom in my life. I mention this because I think it's an important detail regarding me being susceptible to evil or demonic spirits or negative energy being brought into my life at that time. I can't remember the exact date this happened since I wasn't really keeping track of my life at that point, but I remember that night vividly and have replayed it in my head over and over again. I was a 20-year-old male working at a casino in southern Missouri. It was a cold night, so I know it had to be during the winter of 2023. I know this because I have one specific North Face jacket that my dad gave me when I was 12. It was a little oversized, and he always said I'd grow into it. It took 8 years, but I could finally wear it with a hoodie underneath, and it didn't look ridiculous anymore. The day was normal. I can't really remember much of it, considering I probably slept through most of it. I was working as a banquet server that night, which basically meant refilling water glasses and making sure the kitchen stayed in sync with all the servers. Despite my depression, I was still one of the top performers at my job. I hadn't been working there long, but I caught on really quickly, and I actually kinda liked it. The night started out normally. I was dropped off at work by my roommate. I won't say much about him, other than that he was a great guy who just loved to sleep and party, but who doesn't? Anyway, I walked inside, clocked in, and headed to the break room to grab my Starbucks drink. I then walked to the banquet hall, where a couple of other servers and bartenders were finishing the tablecloths and setting out napkins, silverware, and everything else. I met with our manager, and she gave me the rundown on what still needed to be done and what the plan was for the night. I can't remember exactly what show or concert was happening, but I do remember it being dark, with all the round tables packed while a performance took place on stage. I had arrived just before the show was starting and everyone was about to eat. I was instructed to make sure the buffet arrangements were set up and to help carry the trays out with the kitchen staff, just like my normal routine. I forgot to mention that whenever we had bigger shows like this, the manager would hire temporary workers from a company that helped people find odd jobs. I can't remember the name of the company, but I never saw the same temporary workers twice. They ranged from struggling single mothers trying to find work to guys who seemed a little off and looked like they lived alone with a cat in a rundown apartment. She informed me that we would have at least one helper that night. I can't remember if there was another one, but I definitely remember there being one. This is where it starts. I walked to the bathroom closest to the banquet hall so I wouldn't waste time. It was a standard restroom with 2 stalls, 3 urinals, 2 large mirrors above the sinks, and hand dryers. I was in a slight tunnel vision at that point, focused only on using and getting my shift over with, just like any other night. When I walked in, I noticed a pair of legs in the first stall. I stepped into the other stall, immediately sat down, placed my phone face up on my lap, and I noticed the silence in the bathroom was interrupted by a strange humming. Looking back on it, everything happened so quickly. As I listened, I noticed there was a brown leather bag sitting at the man's feet. I froze in confusion because the humming slowly turned into a low chant of some kind. Then, the man started speaking in tongues in the stall next to me. I remember feeling slightly lightheaded as I sat there listening. After a few moments, I started making out one word that kept repeating through whatever language he was speaking. It was the word demonic. Still confused and not really understanding what was happening, I lightly knocked on the stall and asked if everything was all right. I could still feel that strange buzz in my head, but all he said was, "Yeah, just singing a song." I don't remember if I said anything else, because my memories start to blur after this. I got up and went to a completely different bathroom on the opposite side of the hall, one that was a single-person restroom, just so I could forget what had happened and get my mind back on work. And I did exactly that. I got to the bathroom still confused and a little shaken, but that quickly faded. I was back, felt good, and was ready to have a good night. I walked back to the storage room where all the cups and supplies were. I refilled water glasses and handled a few other tasks. And then, it was time to help the kitchen staff bring the food out. I walked into the kitchen, and I barely noticed him at first, but as I met with the chef, he informed me that there was a server in there looking for guidance on what to do. He gestured to a man who was about average height, average build, maybe mid-30s. dark skin that made him look Haitian, bald, and a faint but dark small goatee under the lower lip and chin. The most distinct feature to me were his eyes. I have never in my life seen eyes so black, just straight void all the way through, zero whites, like Mr. Popo. He stood there with his arms behind his back at the entrance of the kitchen, portraying a slight good guy grin. He came up to me, and the chef told me to bring him to the back room and show him the ropes. I was caught off guard at first, and my soul was screaming at me. Nevertheless, I was in a state of mind where I was kind of moving through the motions, so I wasn't really clocking all this right away. I brought him to the back and tried making small talk with him here and there, but I don't think I got anything out of him, or I would have remembered. I felt really uncomfortable being near him and gave him the job of just walking around filling water glasses. After giving him this task, I stayed in the back room, helping with dishes and stacking cups, polishing silverware, all that stuff, while he roamed the showroom, just refilling glasses, just glancing at him. But the lights were off for the show, so I couldn't really see a whole lot. The night went on, and the energy was so potently off. It honestly felt like I was in some movie, and it was where things were just starting to go bad. Dishes were being dropped. Everyone seemed like they were in a rush, but kept messing up and trying to bounce back, but couldn't. The show went fine and everything, but all night, everyone in the back room, which was my manager, assistant manager, and I think one other employee, were all feeling it. These were a solid group of workers too, rarely ever messed up, worked hard, and problem-solved well. It was a very difficult and stressful situation. The energy was off, and me and the assistant manager could tell. A charge in the air, draining all of us. We had started talking here and there about the guy, and she had noticed the same strange things I did. I remembered I never really saw that guy again after experiencing all the chaos in the back room, and I later found out that even the kitchen was a complete wreck that night too. I left early when the show ended because I had worked my butt off and was given the option to leave. I usually always stay and take the extra hour or two, but I just couldn't that night. My roommate picked me up, and we had talked a little here and there about it, but not much was said considering we just wanted to get home, stuff our mouths with grub, and sleep the night away. I got up the next day, not really thinking about it too much, until I got to work around the morning to serve at the lower-end restaurant in the middle of the casino. I walked in for my shift, and there was the assistant manager. She stopped me immediately when she saw me. She told me that last night, about an hour or two after I left when everyone was leaving, she and another bartender were locking up. They were told the guy was still in the bathroom. At this point, it's like 1 to 3 a.m., and there should be no banquet servers in the building at all. She said they tried getting the guy to come out multiple times, but wouldn't respond, and just kept sitting in the first stall. Security had to come and escort the man out of the bathroom. I'm not 100% on this part, but I'm pretty sure she told me that when the security guard went in there, he saw the guy with different, smaller bones laid out on his bag and a few old books lying next to them. So, security escorted the man out, and he just walked away in the middle of the night. It sounds so stupid just saying it like that, but I can't really sum it up better than that. I continued working at the place until I decided to move back home. Moving on to March 2024. This experience had always stuck with me throughout all these years, and I'm starting to take a heavy interest in knowing more about my experience. I wish I could say that was the only time I saw that man, but it wasn't. I had a dream around the same time of this encounter, and it was a little before it happened. I know this because I wrote this dream down in my notes on my phone because of how vivid it was. I was on a sort of hot tub floating on a lake towards a swamp with my roommate and my best friend, but to keep it kind of short, we approached an eerie, cliché horror swamp house out in the middle of nowhere, torchlit. But I noticed a man dressed in black robes, dark skin like a Haitian, surrounded by a small group of about 6 to 7 troubled kids, ranging from 5 to 15, all distinct in their own way. We were there to meet the guy who I made the correlation with about a year later. It was the same guy I saw in the casino. I don't remember why we were there in the dream, or memory. I hung around the group of kids, and I remember seeing the thing that traumatized them on their faces. One boy was about 11 to 12, fat, could tell he had been bullied a lot because of his weight. Another guy, about 15, could tell he had been abused, more than likely by his father, and was just a mean kid, the bully I presumed. Another kid was a girl who was about 15 as well, who was dirty blonde. The hair covered her face, but I felt the pain just by her presence. It was very unsettling. All of their histories oozed with pain inflicted on them in malice. I felt fearful in the dream because I had noticed I was not supposed to be here. I hate even thinking about that dream. It feels wrong, like trespassing. It ended with me seeing that same man on the dock as my friends, and I sailed away in our hot tub. I have had paranormal experiences before, and have had them since I was just a boy. I know this was a long as hell story, but thank you for listening to it. So this story reminded me of The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp, or, Jack Sparrow, as he'll always be to me. And I recently watched the movie, actually. It's very interesting, and the ending, I won't spoil anything, just leaves you with more questions than you might expect, but in a good way. I find it very interesting. The whole vibe of the movie is off in a lot of ways, even from the musical choices. But anyway, it's not a review of The Ninth Gate. I want to say that the idea of demons or demonic activity has great appeal to me in fiction. I don't know how much of it I buy in real life. Is there a hell? Is there a God? Is there heaven and all that stuff? A devil? I don't know. I don't think so. And if there is, then it could just be part of the simulation. I don't know. But that's, too meta for this. The point is that the imagery of it, especially in the dream of just being on a hot tub, and then you come across these kids who are troubled. That's the comparison, or the key point to me, is that this is about childhood trauma. Now, I'm very fortunate. I have no trauma from my childhood growing up. I mean, we moved around a lot. We weren't very wealthy or anything, but my parents loved me. And yeah, it's just, there's no trauma in that sense. So, that helps to be well adjusted as you grow up. But if you struggled with abuse of some sort, it'd be hard for me to relate. And I think if demons are real, or if it's a demon or not, or just some sort of malevolent force, whatever that might be, they would be drawn to people who have trauma in their past. They would be more vulnerable, wouldn't they? More easy, their armor would be already have a chink in it. Don't feel bad. I don't know your whole life story, but to be depressed, to have skeletons in your closet, or just history that you'd rather not have, none of it is your fault. And yeah, you can choose to press on. And I think it's benefit. I think in most cases, you can recover and live, go on to live a great life. And in spite of the bad things that happen to you, it's worth it. So don't despair. Well, understandably despair, but fight against it. And surround yourself with positive people. That's probably the most important thing you can do. Story by West Hurry 9979. The last darts I'll ever throw. One day, I was playing a game of darts with 2 other people. I wasn't a pro by any means. I was just good. I have always been a bit cocky and joked around whenever I played. We were all just taking turns throwing darts, joking back and forth, having a fun time. I decided to be a bit more cheeky than usual, and looked at the other 2 players and joked, "Bullseye." I was just fooling around and throwing trash talk. I never actually thought I would hit it. As I continued to look at the bullseye, I realized I had actually hit it. I was stunned. The others soon realized this as well, and they began to laugh. I joined in, laughing at what had just occurred. I decided that I would take advantage of my bullseye and throw another dart. I gave them a cocky grin and said, "Again." I picked up my second dart. Of course, I would never actually expect myself to throw another bullseye. I was just fooling around and having fun, nothing more than that. Of course, as luck would have it, I threw the dart, hitting the bullseye again. This time, however, I hit directly in the center of the bullseye. I looked at the bullseye and then at my second dart. It had somehow embedded itself directly into my first dart, causing a chain of darts hanging off of the bullseye. I couldn't believe what I had just done. I laughed, then realized how amazing that was. I turned to the other two players and said something along the lines of, "Oh my God, there's no way I'm going to throw another bullseye." To be clear, this was ridiculous. It's like that Legolas meme or some fictional archer that splits his own arrow with a second one. Anyways, I said this because I was certain that I would never hit the same spot again. It would be hard to believe considering I had already thrown 2 bullseyes. The others were staring right at me. I had no choice but to take the third dart that was left and throw it. Whatever confidence I had at that moment had completely vanished, and the only emotion left for me was nervousness. I took the last dart I had out and prepared to throw it. The moment I threw it, I knew something was wrong. The angle was off as the speed was wrong. The look of the dart was different. The dart didn't even seem like it would hit the board correctly. As it traveled across the room, it almost seemed like slow motion for me. I was watching its path slowly, expecting it to miss the board entirely. However, the dart hit the hanging chain of darts that were hanging off the bullseye. A strange sound occurred as it collided, almost like a vibrating sensation, causing the entire chain to move. Everything that had happened so fast that I couldn't tell what was going on. All 3 darts had hit the same spot. All 3 of them embedded themselves into one another, creating one giant chain of darts sticking out of the bullseye. Listen, we were all in a stupor and started laughing, but in an almost agitated way. What the hell? It was simply amazing the amount of luck it took to throw 3 bullseyes like this. Astronomical odds. I have never been able to play this game since then, not because I thought something bad was going to happen, but because I have used up all my chances at doing something that amazing in my life. Some things are best left as a one-time experience. Leave on a high note, right? Story by Anonymous. 2 years in the dark. The last meal I had at a restaurant before COVID lockdown was a short rib ravioli that I boxed up, intending to eat the leftovers. When I got home, I couldn't find the box and looked everywhere in my car because I had remembered putting it in the car. I convinced myself that I must have driven off with it on the roof of the car or something. Fast forward to 2 years later. I had a stack of papers fall in the back seat and reached under my seat to get one and pulled out the Clear to Go box. I literally screamed. It was under the seat, looked pristine, no mold, no smell, looking exactly as it did 2 years earlier. I had had my car detailed more than once in that 2-year span. I worked at a veterinary hospital at the time and was using the car the whole time. There was never a smell, and I reached under the seat many times. It felt like a magic trick. It also felt really wrong. I have no idea how it could have stayed under there undetected for 2 years. It makes me feel weird to this day. Okay, so again, we're talking about time a lot lately, and of course, it's relevant. I think this is another case of time being frozen in that one spot, almost like out of phase, not just time, but the whole food was out of phase. It was frozen. Now, did it vanish? You couldn't find it before, so probably it was out of sync, out of complete sight. Unlike the story with the time guy where he was just in his office, but an open floor plan, so people would have noticed. I mean, maybe that is the case. I don't want to go back to that story too much, but just maybe he did vanish and people just didn't notice. I mean, I don't know how important his job was, but if you can vanish for 4 hours with no one noticing, it seems a bit odd, but who knows? Office work apparently can be, that monotonous and unimportant in the, here and there, the short term, I guess. So maybe that's what happened. But I think that's what happened in this case with the food. It simply phased out of existence, de-rendered itself, you could say, for 2 years in this case, quite a long time. You would hope that's impossible to happen to a human being. But then there are missing 411 cases. Maybe a lot of those are just people who literally vanished, de-rendered from the simulation. What would that feel like? I guess it would feel like anesthesia, where people just say that there is no sleep, there's no transition. You're just counting back and then it's done. No unconscious state. You're just there and back again. So that's what I would imagine this would feel like, because your brain is literally offline. It doesn't exist in the world or the universe for that period of time. So yeah, I would hope, again, like these DOP stories, I hope there's built-in limits for this applying to human beings, because that'd be crazy if not. Just vanishing. I'm here on camera and I vanish for 2 years and I come back like nothing happened. Obviously, things would change. I would notice it, right? Story by Fritzo2162, an $80 miracle. I was just starting college and getting into radiography, and like every other student, I was trying to find a way to pay for everything I needed. One of the things I had to buy was a pair of white hospital shoes. I went to the store, got the pair I wanted, and saw the price tag, and I knew that it was $80. At the time, $80 was too much for me. I was almost broke, and I knew that my checking account would have nothing in it, but I still needed the shoes for the class, so I just decided to take the chance. I paid for them with my debit card and told myself that I would pay the overdraft fee if that's what happened next. What surprised me next was that the payment had gone through. I was almost certain that it would be declined, but it wasn't. I walked out of the store with the shoes and the knowledge that I would have to go to the bank sometime soon. As I walked out, I saw something on the ground. There were 2 $1 bills on the ground right next to the store. I looked around to see if anyone had dropped them, but I didn't see anyone looking for the bills. Right next to the store was a lottery stand. I decided to buy the $2 to buy 2 $1 scratch-off tickets. I don't know why I decided to buy them, because I'm not really the type of person to buy lottery tickets or think that I would win anything. It was just one of those days where I had just found $2 on the ground, and I thought I should try my luck somehow. I scratched the first ticket and nothing came out of it, but when I scratched the second ticket, I won. I had won exactly $80. I just stood there for a moment because the whole thing was so perfectly timed that it didn't even feel real. I had walked into that store with no money in my account, bought a pair of shoes I needed while knowing I couldn't really afford them, found $2 on the ground on my way out of the store, and turned it into exactly the amount of money I spent there. If I had won $20 or $50, it would have been great, but winning the exact amount of money at that exact time, sometimes in life, the timing of certain events is just too perfect to be a coincidence. Of course, there are reasons why what happened wasn't a miracle or something supernatural. Scratch-off tickets have winners, and someone was bound to find the $2 on the ground eventually. It's all very logical and simple, really, but it still seems amazing to me. Story by Ali N. On the Other Side of My Soul. I was probably around 14 or 15 when this happened. My family went to visit my grandparents at their farm, which was not unusual for us. There was nothing special about this particular day. We were just at my grandparents'. My cousins and I were fooling around the house a bit. I remember spending some time in the living room reading. It was all quite normal. I was sitting there, reading, and thinking about nothing in particular. All of a sudden, something strange happened, but I can't really describe what exactly it was. Everything feels sort of hazy. It's difficult to put into words, but I'll try my best. One moment I was looking at the book I was reading, and the next I looked up and saw myself reading the book. Wait, what? I wasn't imagining things. I could actually see myself sitting there, reading the book, looking exactly like I did a second ago. The strangest part is that it didn't feel like I was looking at myself from another angle or anything. It was more like I was seeing myself from somebody else's point of view. I think it lasted only a couple of seconds, but it felt long enough for me to realize what was happening. It was strange, but I wasn't scared or anything. As it happened, I blinked a couple of times, and I found myself looking at my book again, as if nothing had happened. I was back to normal, looking at the book, sitting in the living room, doing exactly what I was doing beforehand. The only difference was that, for a brief moment, I looked at myself instead of the book. I lowered the book and looked up, and what caught my attention was that I could see my cousin walking into the house. I realized that the place where I had seen myself was actually the approximate spot where my cousin was walking into the room. It was strange, because it felt like I had been seeing myself from my cousin's view. I wasn't dreaming, I was wide awake, and there was no reasonable explanation for what I saw. Something like that rarely happens, and I guess I will never know what precisely triggered it. Maybe I was simply hallucinating. The view felt like it came from a particular location, and shortly afterwards, my cousin walked in from there as well. So we can astrally project. That to me is very clear. Our soul, the connection infusion into our physical bodies in this universe, from the meta layer of the real world, I believe. That's what the soul is. Anyways, I believe that it can detach from its host temporarily, for various reasons induced by emotion, strong emotion. In this case, there was no clear catalyst. It simply detached on its own. And you got to view yourself externally. That would be so trippy. But I kind of want it to happen to me. I don't know, maybe that kind of non-catalyst event can only happen when you're young? I doubt it would happen to me now that I'm an adult and more grounded, even though I discuss these stories all the time. Still grounded mentally. I think too much for that, for my soul to just go for a walk. Still, it would be interesting. How would I react? I don't know. You never do until it happens to you, right? So my favorite story, I think it has to be the possible demon story, especially when it's swerved back with the dream of him beforehand. That just makes you wonder. Was this demon, perhaps, there for him specifically? He had dreamed of it before, but nothing really happened. It was just like an influence of miasma over the area, which, affected the kitchen and the staff and everything. Pure chaos, as demons would be, right? But yeah. I love those horror vibes, if applied in real life, but with nothing truly horrible happening. Just gives you those unsettling vibes, but you still get to live on, so that's cool. No blood and guts. Alright, now time for the jokes of the day. When my twins were being delivered, my daughter was born at 5 to midnight, but my son didn't follow right away. The doctor said, "Don't worry, the son will come out tomorrow." Believe it or not, my wife's the only one I've ever been with. All the rest have been an 8 or higher. William Shatner's new line of women's lingerie has been tanking in sales. They were probably better names than Shatner panties. Yeah. This Disney merchandising has gone too far. The other day, I went to a supermarket and they had a sign for an entire aisle of frozen food. Never saw that movie, actually. Just heard it at a good song. Got a warning from the HOA that my dog barks 80 to 100 times a day. But that's just a rough estimate. More glitches up here by Dave. Check them out, and I'll see you next time.